My lesson plans are called Healing Through Art and are 5 50-minute lesson plans that focus on art-based therapy practices. So just a brief overview of what this presentation is going to include. It's going to examine who the target demographic is for these lesson plans. It's going to go over the developmental considerations and inspiring theorists that helped me create these lesson plans, the social environmental factors that the specific target demographic faces and why these lesson plans are specifically geared towards them, and then the lesson plans themselves. So this presentation will examine the ways in which Native American students are in need of culturally appropriate support from school counseling programs. So beyond the scope of the traditional Eurocentric counseling that we do, which is typically ask and answer questions, this is going to be geared towards culturally appropriate and sensitive counseling practices for Native American students. So that target demographic is Native American students enrolled in the public schooling system who are in grades K through 5. So it's very important that this is a public school setting, not a private school. This is meant to be implemented directly into the curriculum that is already there without additional lessons or support for the counselor to be able to implement them. So the developmental considerations and inspiring theorists that help me create these lesson plans. There are 3 main inspiring theorists that helped create this, the first being John B. Watson and his behaviorism. So behaviorism really believes that conditioning and modeling are what help children learn. So this is going to be providing that operant conditioning of positive reinforcement through the art that they make. The counselor will not be modeling anything, but they will see the other students making the same art as they are. We then have Max Wertheimer in the Gestalt theory, and this really lends hand in hand to art therapy because it's a humanistic, holistic, person-centered form of psychotherapy that focuses on the present life of the student and challenges rather than delving into those past experiences. So all of these lesson plans are to help students understand their current situation in life and how to deal with that and not really looking at the past situations that brought them to where they are. Lastly, Jean Piaget's cognitive development theory. Piaget himself actually used art therapy as a way to validate what he believed the stages of children went through cognitively and developmentally. So it really lends itself to this art therapy practice that we're doing with Native American students. This is specifically made for 4th grade students. They are at the point developmentally where they are able to make concrete pictures and images that will represent what they're feeling. But it could also be used with younger grade levels, as art is something that can be done from infancy all the way through late adulthood. So some of the developmental considerations to think about when we talk about art therapy is that it is a visual image making and it is an aspect of a natural learning process. Any child is able to draw and will draw no matter their skill level of what the image is that they create. So in the presence of art therapists, a student is able to get in touch with feelings that they might not otherwise be able to easily express in words, and this is very important for Native American students because it has been proven in studies that the line of questioning that therapists may often or counselors may often give can be seen as intrusive or invasive, especially when you are looking at the cultural context that many Native American students may hold resentment or distrust towards the schooling system due to what has happened to them culturally throughout generations. So art therapy allows the student to express themselves, explore ideas and themes without having to speak and converse directly with the counselor if they don't feel comfortable. So next we have the social and environmental factors, which I just briefly touched on. So one thing, and here is that quote that I'm going to go off of, is Native Americans who do engage in individual counseling often express concern about the shaping of their behavior in a manner that is inconsistent with Indian cultural lifestyle orientations and preferences. So the reason that art therapy touches so specifically to Native American culture and traditions is that it It allows them to create in a way that they have throughout their history, and it does not ask the counselor to in any way shape them, their behaviors, their understanding. It's really just an open form of communication between student and counselor. So some considerations that we're looking at when thinking about why Native American students need specific forms of counseling. They have incredibly high dropout rates. So 60% of Native American students drop out and never graduate from high school. They have suicide rates that have increased 1,000% in the past 20 years in Native American adolescents. There's an unfair prejudice that they face in schools by being a minority that not only is underrepresented, but is often misrepresented. So the Native American history and culture is often told in a Eurocentric framework that does not support the Native American student. So looking at culturally sensitive therapy and counseling techniques helps to bring in their customs and break down some of those barriers that we have between student and counselor. Right, so next, the lesson plans. So the overarching goal of these 5 lesson plans is to create a sense of community and understanding through culturally appropriate art-based therapy techniques. But each lesson has its own goal for that day. So lesson 1 is really just to form a group feeling between all of the students who are involved. All of the students will come from Native American backgrounds. They may be different tribes, but they will all be Native American students in the group. The second is, once that group setting has been established, is to explore the students' feelings of safety and security, not only in their homes, but also in their schools. The third is to promote the students' self-knowledge and self-awareness, their understanding of who they are, which is very important when Native American identity can feel stripped from them in the school environment. The fourth lesson is going to encourage effective communication through spontaneous drawing and look at helping students have more appropriate behavioral responses to things that may make them upset. And lastly, lesson 5 is just to bring closure and remind them of everything that they have learned in the group, consider the relationships, knowledge, and just anything they can take away from it. The counselor's role in each lesson: to be a facilitator. The counselor is there to help pass out materials and provide instructions, to guide, to ask prompted questions during the group discussions or partner discussions, but mostly to be an observer. The counselor is there mostly to observe the art process and take notes. They are not there to counsel, they are really just there to facilitate, observe, and guide. So the art project progression, number 1 is the introductions. So they are asked to draw a picture of your family. That is it. That is the only prompt. Draw a picture of your family. You may find that you have more extended family members than you would see in a traditional European drawing of a family, but that is the only prompt that the counselor is to give them. Draw a picture of your family. Number 2, home and family. Draw a picture of a home. It's very important that you stress a home and not your home. You want to see what a student creates in where they feel safe and what a home looks like to them. Next, lesson 3 is building out, where they will create a collage representing them in their world. So it's literally, they get magazines and they have 5 minutes to go through quickly and rip out pictures. They're not supposed to be given too much time to think about it. They're not supposed to be given time to cut it out. It's rip and get the most primary reaction that you can from the pictures that they choose. Number 4, effective things. Draw things that you love and you hate. One side it's things that you love, the other side it's things that you hate. This allows them to specifically see what do they love in their life, what don't they love in their life, and then a group discussion about the way that we respond to those things. The last one is lesson 5, which is closure. They will trace their partner, write 3 things on that piece of paper that they learned about their partner. Their partner then colors it in, and as students finish up, they will walk around to the other students' tracings and write things that they have learned about themselves or the group during this time. Students should take away a sense of belonging. So lesson 1 and lesson 2 work on building connections with the individuals in the group that they can relate to and bringing a sense of community for them in the school. The next is feelings of safety. Lesson 3, which asks them Lesson 2, which asks them to draw their home, is looking at where do they feel safe, what is safety for them, and how can we provide them with support systems in the school if they aren't feeling safe at home. Sense of self comes from lesson 3 and lesson 4, where they are creating themselves in the collage and thinking about the things that they do and do not like. Native American students can often face a loss of identity in the school system, and this is really helping them think about who they are as individuals and how their culture represents and makes up who they are. The last is communication skills. That's not only getting built in lesson 4 when they're thinking about appropriate ways to react to behavioral triggers, but also in lesson 5 where they're working on communicating with the other people in the group about all of the things they have learned about each other and the things that they value in each other. Why these are culturally appropriate. It allows Native American students to express their feelings in a group setting, which is very typical of what they would do in their tribe or in a large family. One-to-one can often feel very confrontational and awkward for Native American students. They're allowed to express themselves non-verbally through art and creation, which allows them to express without feeling pressure. Using culturally sensitive art practices. So all of the materials being used are newsprint, felt markers, chalk pastels, glue. It's allowing them to use things that they would find in their home and also practices that are often used in Native American culture. Lastly, it's centered around their lives and their culture, their family, their homes, what they enjoy, what they don't, and it makes certain that their culture is represented. And lastly, the assessment method is just informal assessments conducted through observation, oral conversations, and note taking. And I'm just going to leave us with this quote to think about. Native language and culture programs and students' identification with such programs are associated with improved academic performance, decreased dropout rates, improved school attendance rates, decreased clinical symptoms, and improved personal behavior. It is incredibly important that we think about the ways in which we can incorporate students' native culture into their counseling so that they can feel more comfortable and excel in the school system. Here are my references. Please leave any questions if you have any.